attending the 2021 Black Ink Book Festival. This panel is how to be an advocate and ally for Black voices. On this panel, we will discuss what amplifying Black voices and being an ally to Black people looks like in the wake of a dynamic 2020. Before we get started, can I ask our wonderful panelists, and we will start with Ms. Courtney Hicks, if you will introduce yourself, and then we will jump right into it.
Awesome. Thank you once again, Samuel. I appreciate you. I am Courtney Hicks. I am a native of Georgetown, South Carolina, a big, beautiful city, 45 minutes from Charleston. And I graduated from the College of Charleston with my degree in African American Studies and Communication. After I graduated from the College of Charleston, I did go over to the Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture, where I am one of the outreach and public programming coordinators over on that end. Aside from working at the Avery, I do a lot of community grassroots organizing. I cater a lot of the things I do to uplifting Black female voices, recentering historical context, and what we do with the Black women who kind of propelled the things that we don't necessarily hear or learn about.
Okay. Samuel, thank you guys for having me. My name is Michael Bailey. I am the founder and publisher of the MinorityEye.com. We are the largest minority focused media outlet in South Carolina. I serve as a journalist and the publisher of this publication. My background, I worked 13 years in South Carolina legislature, working for the Legislative Black Caucus. I do work with hundreds of community organizations to do outreach and voter education in communities of color across the state.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you again to both of you guys for agreeing to join this wonderful panel. And I think now more than ever, this topic of conversation it's one of the hot tickets around, and it's something that definitely deserves our conversation today. So again, I want to thank you and welcome you guys officially. I also want to say to all of the viewers, we do have a feed and a Q&A session on the right-hand side. I believe that's the right-hand side for you guys. Feel free to ask any questions, and we will weave them in as the conversation is going. Be vocal. If you hear something that you agree with, say something. If you hear something that you don't agree with, say something. This is an open dialogue for all of us. And again, we appreciate you guys for joining us tonight. My first question, I'm going to throw this out to Michael first, because I started with Courtney, right? I started with Courtney. So I gotta start with you. Got to start with you. So for you, Michael, tell us in your words, what does it mean to amplify Black voices?
Thanks for that question, Sam. Well, amplifying Black voices is just magnifying Black voices, and it's not about just Black voices, but Black perspectives. And I want to not, make sure that people understand that a lot of times, especially when you have a narrative, one side has a story and the next side has another story, and somewhere in the middle is truth. A lot of times people of color, especially Black people, our perspectives of a certain situation or a certain event are not magnified or not put forefront on TV, radio, and so therefore, in order for people to fully understand or get our take on an event, our voices have to be magnified, and there needs to be some type of resources, some type of platforms where our voices and our perspectives can be magnified. And just, to me, amplifying Black voices is about helping Black perspectives reach the general public.
Wonderful. Courtney, what are your thoughts?
I agree, and I also have a few things to add. So when I think of amplifying Black voices, it's often coming to a point where we are looking at community members and people who are actively involved in the things that we want to amplify. So this comes from also people doing their research in reading and researching and truly understanding the topics that they want to amplify, and making sure that they're supporting local creatives or local grassroots organizers who are doing the work. So a lot of times we have people who are constantly advocating for things, who have been doing the historical research, who have been fighting for a very long time to make sure that their voices are being heard and making sure that the community's voices are being heard. But because they may not have this cookie cutter or fit into this cookie cutter mold of what it looks like to be appealing to all audiences or appealing to a white audience, their voice is not as amplified or is not as propelled as others who may be a little bit more pleasing. So when you think of amplifying Black voices, it's amplifying all Black voices as long as it's grounded in truth. Not just ones that make you feel comfortable, not just a voice that agrees with what you agree with, but make sure that it's a voice that's accurate and is actually doing the work on the ground.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I do want to pause for the cause. We have another panelist that just joined us. I know you guys can't hear it, but we're giving a round of applause for Ms. Gilchrist. Will you please introduce yourself? And then I'm going to throw a question at you real quick.
No problem. I love jumping in. And I apologize for being late. I had a bit of a Wi-Fi issue because I have a teenager. But my name is Shauni Gilchrist, and I'm a writer based in Columbia, South Carolina. I write mainly about interactions as they relate to race, equity, gender, and inclusion more on a social and interpersonal level. I've written for long reads. I've written, actually, I covered the Dylann Roof trial when we were living in Charleston for long reads from start to finish. And I've written for the Washington Post and Catapult, Lit Hub, and some others. And I'm just really excited to be here and thrilled to have been asked.
Absolutely. Well, we are glad you were able to make it, and glad your teenager didn't ruin the show.
It was close.
It was close. It's okay, but you made it. You're here now, and we are glad you're here. The first question, we really only got to this first question, so you arrived just in time. But we're really just asking everyone, what does it mean to amplify Black voices? So for you, that's the question that we ask you as well.
All right. Well, it's a tough. Publishing world's tough. It's tough no matter what the color of your skin is, but it is 18 to 20 to 25 more times more so if you're a Black writer. I've found that editors, a lot of white editors, have a prescribed storyline that they want to hear. And I think it's the most important thing is to be truthful and honest, vulnerable, but only vulnerable to a point, because we do have to protect ourselves and protect our peace. But, to find a way to make that honesty and openness meet with a strong will and knowing ahead of time what it is you want to accomplish, that is in a lot of ways key, because the more of us who do that, the more those gatekeepers have to listen. And, it's finding allies who, whether they've had experience because they're in publishing and are Black or brown, or just finding somebody who realizes that there's a lot to learn. It's hard to do, but that is the key. All those things, I think, are the key to amplifying Black voices, and then people need to share them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to, because you mentioned, the literary world and publishing and all of those things. We do have a question in the comment section that actually speaks to that. It comes from Mr. Caleb Cooper. And he wants to know, what ways can advocates and allies combat systemic racism in and around publishing and in the literary industry? So I will actually throw that to Courtney first, if you will tackle that one for me.
I was just going to say, please don't call my name, because I have no experience in the publishing.
See, and that's the thing, right? So I wanted to throw it to Michael, but I was like, I just hit him with one first. And Shani just came in, and she was the one that probably has the most experience, but I couldn't hit her with a back-to-back. So I'm sorry, Courtney. You're in.
I felt my hands getting clammy. I said, "Oh God, he's gonna call me."
You got it though. You got it.
Shani, and give me a second to marinate on it because I didn't look at the Q&A, and I don't want to say anything that's inaccurate, especially with this not being that with publishing is specific, not being my area of expertise. I want Caleb to get the best answer possible. So I'm going to shoot it back over to Shani. What's ready? And if I can piggyback on something she says.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So what ways can advocates and allies combat systemic racism in and around publishing and in the literary industry?
I think the most important thing is listening and putting aside. It's hard to recognize your own bias. All of us, it's just hard. But when it comes to the lack of Black voices in the publishing world, in the journalism worlds, and the entire writing world, I think the biggest wall that we run into is prescribed stereotypes of not only what editors, advocates, anybody in the publishing wants to hear, but what they're expecting to hear. And when it comes to Black writers, you have to. There hasn't been enough of those voices in the 21st century, who've been amplified to the point that the entire Black experience has been heard from. It is a multiverse of experiences, and the most important thing is just to go into a partnership, friendship, advocacy situation with open ears and an open mind.
Wonderful. Michael, we will come to you next.
Okay. Do you just want me to pick up on Shani's question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm in a different end of the industry. I'm more of not book publishing, but I'm into articles and papers and things of that nature. But one of the things that writers can do a lot of time is to make sure that we are aware of your work, especially if you write about racism or things of that nature. I'm always surprised as an editor how many actual authors don't write. They don't write press releases. They don't share press releases about their book. They don't share content. One of the things I always tell clients, or if I'm working with anybody, if let's just say that you're writing a book and it has to do with racism, and you have events like George Floyd and that, call media and news networks and say, hey, I'm an author. I've written a book about a similar situation, or I've written a fiction story about a similar situation, and I can lend a different perspective. And that's a lot of times we, as in the news publishing industry, we're constantly looking for content, and authors have hundreds of content, pages and pages. Call your media outlets, make them aware. If you're not a minority writer, you may have written or read a fellow colleague's book that might, lend something to an event. If you have journalists, friends, or reporters or producers say, hey, I know a friend that has written a book called, why don't you give him your call or let me give you your contact? It's hundreds of different ways, but I think it goes back to what I was talking about, perspectives. We have to be willing to come out. Courtney was talking about come out of comfort zone. We have to be willing to come out of our comfort zone and not just promote ourselves, but promote others.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I finally have something to add.
You got something? Okay.
So one thing, I know we have a lot of people from Columbia here, but one thing in Charleston is we have a larger news publication outlet that seems to do a great job of erasing Black perspectives and Black voices. And I think it's out of laziness. So one thing that you need to really take the time to do is the groundwork. And that's where this investigative journalism goes past just when you are framing or conceptualizing a story. It needs to go with who you're highlighting and who you are propelling in what you're writing. So, yes, you may have that background, you may have done the historical work, but you also need to be doing the groundwork, talking with Black people in specific, elders, figuring out ways in which you can amplify old and new stories in a way that can be not only great for those who are doing the work, but great for those who are also wanting to learn more. We're in an interesting time. And why I say it's an interesting time is because you can't go a single week without there being a trending topic that's surrounding Black folk. And you have people who are starting to feel that, righteously so. And they want to support, they want to uplift, they want to do what they can in the best way possible to end what they are seeing continuing in real time. So it is your responsibility to actually take that time to help educate the masses. So just do the work. Just go and look and actually take that time to research. Was that
Awesome.
good?
It was good. It was good. It was so good. Caleb said, "Oh, she's marinating now." So that's wonderful. Now, I do want to ask, because all of you guys kind of touched on this a bit in terms of, doing research, kind of getting some backhand and firsthand knowledge from individuals who have that lived experience. For a person who wants to enter into this space of writing and making sure that Black voices are amplified, they hear things like, do the work, do your research. Where should a person start? Like where do you send them? Where should they go to start getting that historical frame of reference as well as that lived experience? And I'll throw that to anybody who wants to answer.
That's hold on. Give me the question again.
For somebody who wants to get into this type of writing to amplify Black stories, Black voices, Black narratives,
Okay.
Where should a person go to get that historical frame of reference?
Well, if you're a person of color, number one, I think you start in your community. If you're not a person of color, you're going to have to start with friends or reading, history books or historical events. I think you get started if you want to get into amplifying Black voices. Social media. I started out blogging. Blogging, it's still the best way to get started, because once you start writing, you want to make sure that you are articulating and you have an audience, and what you're saying, you want to make sure that it resonates. That in itself, if you are a blogger, once you develop an audience, then you kind of get an understanding of if people understand what you're saying, if people support what you're saying, or if people are against what you're saying. And once you start writing, especially blogging and sharing your thoughts on social media, you're going to get a lot of comments. And when people start making the comments, that is an opportunity to interact with them. Well, if you're against what I said, if you don't agree with me, why? And so once you open dialogue up, then you kind of understand, you start getting we back to the perspectives. We start getting more perspectives. And so now you have content, and, you can do interviews with people, trying to figure out, find out if any of your friends and your friends that you have that are of color, have they experienced any racism in any industry or, at their job. Once you start networking and start writing and let people know, you have to let us know that you're an ally, because we're not going to automatically assume that you are an ally. And just because you're my friend at work, I'm not going to literally assume you're an ally for the cause, And so you have to be willing, if you're not a person of color, you have to be willing to engage your friends of color in this dialogue. And it may be uncomfortable. It may be scary, but for the most part, people of color, we want to talk about it. And we don't mind talking to our white friends or, anyone about our experience and what we've been through. We're always looking to share. And so that willingness to start a conversation is how you start. That's what I would, say. If you're looking to get in, you got to start with first having a conversation about what's going on and what people think.
If I can piggyback on Michael there, that was fantastic. I would just piggyback that is extremely important, and it, opening up that conversation, going to your coworker, your friend, your neighbor, it definitely sends the message that there are allies out there. I would say after 2020 and now the first week of 2021, that there are also times where you have to read the room. The Black people have especially been through a lot in the last year, and the Black community is affected differently by COVID. We're stressed by that. Everything that went on last summer. You turn on the internet, open your laptop, and all we see a lot of the time is echoes of a lot of years of trauma. And so when things are coming to a head culturally, riots and road protests around that. Sorry, I live close to downtown Columbia, so riots comes to mind because we actually had a riot last summer when agitators came in, and we were sitting in our backyard listening to flashbangs. And so in those moments, I was getting text messages from white friends and white colleagues saying, "What can I do? What can I do?" And it kind of, to be blunt, it got old really fast because I was stressed out, because I was worrying about my children, I was worrying about my mother, I was worrying about what was going on up the street. So, in a moment of national crisis, as the crisis is happening, if you feel the urge to reach out as a white ally, don't make it about you. We need, as Black people, as Black writers who, as writers by nature, writers absorb everything. And so not only are we absorbing all of the things that we take in through our senses as writers, we're also absorbing all of the trauma that is occurring in the moment. And so in a lot of ways, for people who write, those feelings are amplified, and it's hard. And so, if you feel like you need to check in and say, "Hey, are you okay?" That's great. That would be welcome. But making it, "What can I do? I feel so bad. I'm a white person and I never really understood." Maybe ease that in later would be my advice. And as far as the research, where do you start with the research? From a writer's perspective, you have to open up your senses in that way, and that you make yourself vulnerable by opening up your senses and absorbing everything and reading everything and watching everything. And you have to figure out where to put that wall, where you have to stop so that you can have some peace. But you still have to open yourself up to that vulnerability of taking it all in. For me personally, writing is how I figure it all out for myself. And then from a publishing / editor's, point of view, I would say, once again, open your ears as far as finding those experiences and finding people who have those lived experiences. You've got to show up in, whether, right now it's a pandemic, so I guess showing up in social media, showing up at this conference, and listen and it goes with all aspects of life. You have to put yourself out there, but showing up at where the conversation is, using hashtags right now. I mean, right now, because you can't show up in person, use the hashtags on Twitter. Go through Facebook groups, writers groups that are, there is every niche of writers group on Facebook. And, just say, hey, I'm here because I'm wanting to hear from people who are living this, and I would love to hear from someone about it.
Wonderful. Courtney, I saw you shaking your head through a couple of those points. Did you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I agree 100% with both Michael and Shani said, but especially towards the end of Shani's piece, when she was talking about respecting Black folk boundaries and respecting Black folk business. So that right there is two of the most important things you can do. And that's why I hate the term ally, because sometimes allyship is very easy. It's a cheap way out of saying, I just don't agree with it. I'm here for you. But it's no longer any point of doing any work. I'm never going to say that sharing online and looking at hashtags is slacktivism, although it can transition to that in a certain light. But you need to look daily in the way that you live, in the way that you walk, the way that you talk. How can you truly be an accomplice and a co-conspirator for Black people and Black people's needs and desires and the better quality of life that we deserve, that we truly and honestly deserve to have? We made everything. I like to say that we made everything. So we deserve to enjoy it. We deserve to enjoy the fruits of our labor and have a support system that wants to assist with that truly. So a lot of times when we are talking about allyship, they want the burden of education to be on Black people. That's very unfair. I have to deal with seeing Black people die in real time. I have to deal with worrying about my community facing a global pandemic and dying at high disproportional rates. It is not my responsibility in any form to educate you on things that I had to seek out on my own. I went to public school. I went to a predominantly white college. The information that I gleaned and the information that I am able to say so beautifully, I did not learn. It was not something that was handed to me. It's something that I had to seek out. So you have to do that same work. And that's why it's important to be in spaces like this, where you have people who are invested in telling Black stories through literature, who are invested in telling Black stories through integral storytelling. Pay attention to that. And by paying attention to that, and by supporting them through their work, not only are you amplifying a Black voice, but you're also putting money in that Black voice's pockets. You're once again legitimizing not only their trauma, but also the beauty in what they created in spite of it. And that's very important. That's so, so important. That's why I say Blackness isn't a monolith. Yes, we go through a lot of things. Yes, a lot of things affect us equally, but there's a lot of things that make us really important and unique. And sometimes we feel as though we can't enjoy the joys and pride of what we create because of the trauma that is sometimes surrounding it. So make sure that the Black people around you are feeling supported, are feeling safe enough to want to share and have these conversations with you. So that way you can begin to figure out a different methodology on how you want to research about things that seem to woe the Black community. And one thing that's also really weird, I wouldn't say weird, but a lot of times we like to think that the civil rights movement and stuff was so long ago. When in all actuality, a lot of the people who have paved the way for us, such as Miss Millicent Brown, who's a great friend of the Avery, they're still alive and kicking. They're still here. They are working their iPhones. They send me emails every day. So you can go to different resources, such as the Avery Research Center, and look on the Low Country Digital Archives. You can look at these different digital sources, do research, and then see if they are available to have that email correspondence with you. But always ask initially, do you have the emotional bandwidth to share with me these experiences? Don't just come straight off of, you know how I feel. you don't really know exactly. I understand the empathy, but let's make sure that we're checking in first emotionally before we are asking people to share these really gruesome moments that may occur in their lives.
And also, like all races of people, Black people have, and Black writers have a rich array of experiences and lives. We don't always have to talk about racism. If you want to if you want to reach out, it does not always have to be about that. It can also be about just common interests or just learning about a person as a person. And, because of the times we're in and the experiences we've had, naturally these topics will likely enter the conversation, but, you don't always have to rush in to talk specifically with someone about racism, because we have such a vast array of experiences and interests, and a lot of the time I find it really interesting when people are surprised that I might have something in common with this, with them as a white person, that I may have had a common experience. I have a very diverse family, a very diverse background. My husband is white. My grandmother was mixed. So for me growing up, it was, we all were, saying we weren't comfortable talking to somebody with a different skin tone was just not even a thought. And so it's interesting as an adult when people see you as a person who has more of their own agency, and things are going the way they've been going. People tend to think that there's only this one topic, but as Black people, one of the things that makes us beautiful is the rich array of things that we do live and see and experience as people in common with other people and as a race.
Awesome. Thank you so
Black people are more
much.
than their trauma. That's just the overall thing. Black people are more than their trauma.
Right.
Absolutely. Courtney, when you were talking, you mentioned kind of the financial implications of all of this. And I would love to get everyone's thoughts on, businesses. We see actually more than just businesses. We see cities. We see, places like Minneapolis, DC, New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, all of these places kind of, responding to our need to have this megaphone and have our voices amplified. Some call it performative, some call it a step in the right direction, but they're doing specific advertising, billboards, and murals across the country to kind of respond to what Black people are dealing with right now. What are your thoughts about that? Is it genuine? Is it not? How do you feel about it? And anybody can answer that first.
If it was really, really genuine, then it wouldn't have been something that started after global uprisings. Yes, it's great to say I'm a friend of Black people right now because you want to continue to have the support of Black money. However, it needs to be something that is more than just imagery. It needs to be something that we see in those that you hire. It needs to be something, and you see, like, this is why I love Target. And I know this is really off topic, but I love Target. I love Target because before this, they always gave shelf space. They always amplified. They always supported Black women in specifics in beauty, in health, in hair care, and in clothing. I put on the wrong sweatshirt today because I had on my sweatshirt that the student from A&T designed for their Black History collection. That's not something that they just started doing. That's something that they've been doing for a long time. And it's a framework that I believe that other businesses should be following. But one thing that my friend Tamika Gatson and I always talk about is if you truly want to be a co-conspirator and accomplice for Black people, and I don't say people of color because we're talking about Black people, you need to give radically to Black people. support radically to Black businesses, not just the ones that you see that are extremely mainstream that have the shelf space, but once again, look deep into your community in the ways that you investigate, in the ways that you're framing how you support, and look into those small startups, because you never know how your support, how your $20 purchase can be that one thing that propels them to a next level for their website. It could be that next thing that makes them continue to do what they're doing because they feel as though they have that support. So when you're looking at Black-owned businesses, this is another way, as Shauni said, that you're realizing that, once again, Blackness is not a monolith and I'm more than my trauma. If I have something that is really my passion, if I have something that I support, if you want to really support and love the whole Black experience, then you're going to support my passions. So I would say, yes, a little bit of performances post George Floyd, because you saw those paintings and you saw those things going up, but what truly changed in terms of protocol practices in different larger corporations, I really can't name more than 5 huge changes in the few. So we want to make sure that we're not just focusing on the artistic expression, because a mural isn't going to pay my rent. So we want to make sure that we are looking at that and making sure that we're making comparable decisions for what is actually going to support Black bodies.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with you, Courtney, and I'm kind of conflicted because being a business owner and seeing all the outpouring of organizations and businesses following the George Floyd incident, and working in marketing as long as I have, I understand a lot of it is theater, it's PR. A lot of it is PR, and it is necessary PR. So I don't fault them for doing it, but we as Black people have to be able to hold them accountable. So if you're putting on your banner on your website, when I visited website, oh, Black Lives Matter. Okay, well then you got to knock on the door. Okay, well, what else are you prepared to do? Where's the check? Working in politics, understand that whatever you support, you fund. Whatever you believe in, you fund. And so as African Americans, we have a huge $1.2 trillion buying power. So we need to start having conversations with these brands that we're dumping money in. You know, Nike, and all the money we pour into Nike. We're not having a conversation with Nike. We're not, Black HBCUs are having a conversation with Nike. Hey, you know, you've been supporting, but you say you support Black lives. Okay, here's the problem. Amazon was really disappointed with Amazon. That you went to Amazon and they support all Black lives and all this. Right now, we have very few African Americans in the tech industry. The tech industry has about 3% African Americans in it that are actually working in places like Google, Facebook. Okay, you're supporting, and Facebook will say, oh, we support this and we doing this, but who are you hiring? Facebook has the lowest amount of people of color of any of these big tech companies. Are you really supporting, or is this theater? So what we have to do as people of color, we have to have a conversation with these companies. If you flying the ally flag, okay, are you prepared to do what an ally do, or as Courtney would say, a co-conspirator? You know, I need you to start backing some of this stuff, especially brands that we spend a lot of money with. Have a lot of the time, and that goes for cities and counties as well. They say one thing, but working in politics, you know, I know that they got a canned statement, and this is the statement they're supposed to say. But in reality, what are you doing? You know, City of Columbia, you know, oh, we got to do this. But right now we have hundreds of eviction cases in the City of Columbia where people lost their jobs because of COVID. We have a Black man, a mostly Black city council. Okay. And most of the people are people of color. And so what are we doing the next step? And we, once again, to start that conversation, if you're going to fly the ally flag, we need to approach them and make sure that they are being an ally. They're doing the actions that an ally would take.
I completely agree with both what both of my fellow panelists said there, and I want to piggyback on something that Courtney said about spending your dollars. I love that puppy. Aw, but yeah, Black startups, and especially Black startups that are founded by Black women, are so much less likely to get venture capital or grant money or any of those entrepreneurial legs up that are almost considered mainstream. It's really hard. So spending your money on those small businesses and startups is a really big deal because they're not getting the same financial resources in most cases that other businesses are getting. And as far as businesses doing their allyship PR, DEI is not a catchphrase. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not a catchphrase, and it's not just something that you can throw out there and say you support. It's a tool with an end goal, and that end goal is belonging, and those results within a company have to be measurable and quantifiable, or else is your culture actually changing? Are you actually promoting equity within your own culture? Because if you're not doing that within your own company, there's no way that you're serving your customers with that same attitude. So it has to be put in to something that is measured. And those hard conversations that people have to have with employees, with colleagues, with coworkers, they have to be put into action that can be placed into a year-end report of the companies put out reports at the end of the year of where they internally succeeded, what needs working on. That needs to be a part of that. It has to be measurable, or else you're not the chances of it being a part of your culture and you promoting as a company the culture of accepting Black experiences, it's not really going to do anything unless it's something you can measure.
Thank you. I love that you tied the measurement of D&I efforts of businesses and companies. I'm studying this thing called results-based accountability, and the top 3 questions that it asks is how much have you done, how well have you done it, and who's better because of it. So those are 3 critical questions that all companies need to be asking themselves when they're doing these things. Who's better because of it. To that end, I do want to go to the Q&A section again because we have another great question, and this will actually be from Ms. Gilchrist. To start it off, with the recent movement in the publishing industry to diversify the authors that they publish, do you believe that this is enough, or is it just reactionary to public criticism?
It's not at the point yet where it's enough, I would say. And yes, I think a lot of it is reactionary to public criticism, but a lot from what I've seen and from colleagues and friends I have in the publishing industry, there are less big public splashes of things that are happening. There's a new editor I think she's at Random House, Lisa, and of course now her last name is escaping me because it's after 4:00. But she's been a Black advocate for books and writers in New York for years. She was with several literary magazines, and then she was the executive director of the National Book Foundation, and she just left there. Actually, this week was her first week with Random House. This is something that a lot of people who aren't in the publishing industry are going to know, but I think she's maybe the third or fourth Black person I've seen moved into these very high levels of editing positions who have the experience of the marketing, the friend raising, the fundraising, the networking, and the lived experience of being a Black person in a heavily gate-kept world. And that's where the movement is going to be and needs to be. There needs to be more of that. You can announce any initiative you want, but if you don't have Black people on the other side of things that aren't so public, that are in big decision-making positions, then it goes back to what I was saying before. Where's the results? What are you actually doing to change something? How do you measure that? It's hard right now because everybody's on social media, everybody's being loud, everybody wants people to think that they are on our side. But it's not so much about those loud voices as it is, making the parts of the machine work differently. That's where the key is.
Thank you. Did any of our other panelists have anything to add to that?
No, I didn't.
No? Good? Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Gilchrist. So there's been a huge disconnect from folks in the media of who they call on to represent Black people and how Black people actually feel about the people who they're calling, who claim to represent us. My question for you guys is, whose voice needs to be amplified, and how do we distinguish the ones who create their own platform and the ones whose platform needs to be elevated? That can be
that's a hard one.
Right. It exists on so many different levels. Wow, Sam.
Saving the best for last. You got to go out with a bang.
Okay. From personal experience, in the political world and working in media, and I spent 2 years working at Fox. I worked on the independent news program at the local Fox station. And a lot of times it's about sponsors. Who am I going to put on the camera so my sponsors won't get mad? And who's going to tell the narrative that my sponsors want to hear? And a lot of times and I don't know a better word. I'm searching, but the term safe Blacks comes to mind. That's who they put on the camera. And a lot of times it's not about racism. It's about dollars. If I have an opportunity and I want to contextualize or articulate the Black Lives Matter protest that happened downtown for Columbia, and I'm out there and I'm the producer, and you bring me 2 tapes, and one the reporter asked Courtney, and another one asked Shani. Now, which one? Okay, which one am I really gonna put on the TV? And it has to do. One of the things that I've learned in working in politics and media, true power is wielded behind the camera. And who gets to say and who gets to make that decision of what is played and what stories are told. And a lot of times we get caught up in the fact that we see a Black face at the news desk. We see a Black reporter. But a lot of times they're just, somebody wrote a script and handed it to them, and you say this. And we have to get to a point where we have to say, you're not from my community. How are you articulating? Because whether we believe it or not, they believe that, it's only a few people that speak for Black people. We can go get so and so, and that's the person that speak for black people. That's him. Okay, you gonna speak for black women? Okay, this is the black woman that speak for all y'all. That is a belief they have, and it is a belief that we let them, harbor, and we have to be willing to speak out against it and say, who are you hiring? When you hiring these people, or you running stories, why you running the story? If you look at, this past week as a perfect example, and the narrative that is being played in the media, that these people stormed the Capitol because Trump worked them up. Trump got them in a tizzy. These weren't bad people. They was lied to. Trump lied to them. Oh, they would have been good, but he lied to them. And, Black Lives Matter. Oh, they came, look at these crooks. They came there to riot, rob, ain't nobody worked them up. They ain't mad about George Floyd. They just down here to steal and start trouble. Once again, we talking about that narrative. And a lot of time the media is forced to put people on TV. And when they know it got to be a person of color, I'm going to put that black person that's going to tell the narrative that I want to tell. And we have to be willing to tell the narrative. And part of that narrative is you don't speak to me. You don't speak for me. And we got to be able to interact with these media companies on social media and say, who is this person and why are you telling the story? Because I'm still very upset with the way they're telling this narrative that happened in DC. They're not calling them all the predator. Okay. Some say riot. Insurrectionists. Okay. And they floating around terrorists and they're going back and forth between these words. But the narrative is Trump worked them up. Trump the bad guy. And you see what happened. And we all know that if that crowd was a different color, it would have been a different story. And we have to be willing to hold media companies accountable because, working in the industry, I understand it's about sponsors. But at the end of the day, as a journalist, do I want to tell a complete story and a true story, or do I want to tell the story that I think that won't, I don't want to lose any readers. I don't want to offend anybody. And a lot of times it's about, I don't want to offend anybody. So if I get somebody on that's going to be, too real, for the lack of a better word, I don't want that. I don't want the angry black man. I don't want the angry black woman. I want that middle ground, that moderate, that saying, yeah, I'm disappointed, I'm hurt. We don't want nobody pissed off. We don't want pissed off. We want hurt. And I'm gonna pray for you, and we praying, and I forgive you. That's the narrative that they want. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
we have to hold them accountable.
Jump in there, Courtney. I know you chomping.
And then my kid's acting up, so I'm trying to get my son's acting a fool. He waits till we get in front of company to do it.
They always do.
But basically, the first thing is a lot of people are getting their information online, which is great. That's a great space for us to share. It's a great place for us to get some really live, raw, great forms of emotion and grit that may not be on the media outlets because they're looking for a more non-threatening black person to take up those spaces. However, go on your phone right now. If you're following Sean King, if you're following DeRay, unfollow them right now. Those are not voices that represent black people. Those are not voices who are truly doing work for black people and not personal gain. Those are people who are really exploiting black trauma in a way where they can rise up as some type of hero, self-appointed media tycoon, and using black trauma as a way to advance up this media ladder. It's wrong. It's disgusting. And if I see them in the streets, it's over. I can say that on this. But make sure you're unfollowing them. And once again, listen to black women. support Black women, especially your non-traditional, appeasing, Black, comfort-looking Black woman. Support the Black woman that got orange hair, tattoos up and down her body, and maybe throw in a little festive language, because that also is a true perspective. That's a true take on Blackness. And you shouldn't be saying, oh, well, this person is exuding more of something I would support because they are softer and more soft spoken. If that is what makes you more comfortable, if all forms of Blackness did not make you feel comfortable and at ease, then that's an inward problem that you need to work on. So make sure that you are supporting and looking at grassroots organizing groups, and I can't say this more, especially if you are in Charleston. So if you are in Charleston and you aren't following Charleston Activist Network, I will say her name till the end of the days, Tamika Gadsden, every day does a terrific job of making sure that she tells you what's going on. She gives you historical context on a local and national level, so you're unable to say that you do not know, because she gives you access to this with some great historical ties that she gets from Avery. So make sure that you're just looking at who's doing the work in your community. Our communities are filled with so many amazing people. So many amazing people who just need that support. So make sure you're doing some digging. As Shani said before, search hashtags, look for truth, and don't be afraid to fact check. And if you know something's wrong, check that person. Accountability is an act of care. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. If you take the time to hold somebody accountable, rightfully so, let's throw that in there, rightfully so. Taking the time to hold somebody accountable is an act of care, because you actually want them to take the time to reflect and continue to produce great, accurate content and great, accurate work. So don't be afraid to do that. And that's pretty much all I have. Make sure we defund Shaun King immediately. But that's pretty much.
Yeah, my husband's in a fellowship group that was going to have him on a panel, and I called up every single organizer, even though I'm not even in the fellowship, and was like, no. Here's a list of Black women who would be 80,000 times better to have on this panel. He's got a bad history, and he's a lot of dollars have disappeared. A lot of dollars have disappeared. But I'd like to go back to one of the things I was saying before about putting Black people in decision-making positions that aren't necessarily so public. That the same goes for newsrooms and editorial boards and things like that. I mean, MSNBC now has a Black woman president who actually started out here in Columbia at WIS. But, I truly believe it was because of that changeover that we saw Representative Cori Bush sitting at her desk explaining, what she was feeling and experiencing as a Black freshman congresswoman who's been on the Hill this week. Granted, I can't watch everything at the same time, but I didn't see that on any of the other news networks. She's sitting at her desk. She's got tattoos. She's real. And that needs to be part of the mainstream. And that's not going to happen unless we have people in decision-making positions who understand that there are so many levels of realness to being a Black representative, because, once again, being Black isn't a monolith.
Thank you so much. And it's crazy. I had more questions, but we are actually out of time. So what I want to do is thank all of our panelists for their thought-provoking insights. In the lounge area, for our viewers, in the lounge area, there's actually a table with this panel's name on it. If you would like to continue this conversation, or if any of our panelists are willing to hold office hours in that lounge area, they will actually be announced there as well. If you want to continue that conversation, please head to the lounge area, to the table with our name on it, and you can continue to have this conversation there. Once again, I want to thank all of our panelists. and all of our viewers. Before we head out, panelists, if you will tell the people where they can find you, where they can connect with you, drop your Facebook, your IG handles, your websites, give the people all of that information. Try to do it in 30 seconds or less. Let's go. Michael.
It's real simple. You can go to the website, theminoriteye.com, and you can find me on all social media. The handle is The Minority Eye.
Shani.
I typed my Twitter handle in, and Twitter I'm at Shauni R. Gilchrist, and I put it in the chat there. And I'm on. Well, I never update my Facebook page. Honestly, I need to get better about that. But Instagram is the same handle as Twitter, and I'm at ShauniGilchrist.com.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yes, so I'm Courtney Hicks on Facebook, on Instagram, Courtney_HI, and Twitter is just for the friends and family. So those are the two that I'm most active on where you can connect with me.
Thank you so much. Again, I want to thank all the panelists for providing their thoughts and their insights again. You have made it such a pleasure to be a part of. Thank you, Black Ink Charleston, for allowing me to moderate this conversation with these wonderful people. To our viewers, thank you again for joining us. Stay tuned for all of the other panel discussions and events that are happening. Make sure you check the agenda and the schedule so that you don't miss anything. Thank you all. Have a great evening.